Hey listeners, thanks for dropping in. I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa. And this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
dirtbag murderers.
Hey listeners.
Welcome back to Buried Motives.
We are glad you're joining us this week, and I am so excited to hear Christy's case.
I'm looking forward to telling this one. And I think I found a case that hasn't been talked about a lot.
Ooh, you've been doing well with those lately.
I don't know how I'm coming across them.
You're digging deep.
I am digging deep. That is what we like to do here. If you've been listening for a while, you know that I am a girl mom through and through. I have 3 amazing daughters, and I love being their mom. Today, we are talking about a boy mom. I'm going to tell you a case mainly about the mama of a mama's boy.
What? Wait, the mom?
Of a mama's boy. So a mom and her boy.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, he's a man, but...
Is he?
Technically, by age, he's just barely a man. So we're talking about a mom and her son.
Okay. And they commit crimes together?
They commit a crime together.
Okay.
But when I was starting this, what came to my mind, and maybe you guys have seen them, but have you seen those TikToks or reels of overbearing moms with their sons saying things like, she's teaching her son to cook so he isn't impressed with your daughter's frozen lasagna?
No.
I'm sure some of our listeners have seen these. These videos are so cringy to me. And all I can think of when I watch them is the question of what type of monster-in-laws those women are going to eventually be.
Yeah, that doesn't seem nice at all.
It isn't. I say to them, good luck, ladies, dating a guy with a mother who thinks that her little prince can do no wrong and believes that no one will ever be good enough for him. Because sometimes a frozen lasagna is the best we can do, and you better just say thank you and eat it up.
Or cook it yourself.
Exactly. The woman in this case did the most unthinkable thing to a woman whom she believed wronged her precious little man, a man who was actually a massive dirtbag. This mom would lose her own life over the ordeal, and the son would continue to wreak havoc.
Oh, man.
Most of us moms would do anything we could to protect our children. But what this woman did was inexcusable and unwarranted. She is 100% a dirtbag mama.
But she thought she was doing it to protect her child?
Yes.
Or to avenge her child?
Both. Melissa, it's always both.
Okay.
It all started when a boy met a girl and fell in love.
It always does start that way.
Yep. I think the best and the worst stories start that way. William Ray Dodd was born on January 27th, 1918, in Sequoia County, Oklahoma. He moved to Cherokee County while still a child and attended school at Mount Zion. At the young age of 18, William married the love of his life, Dolly Marie Tennyson, on November 30th, 1936. Dolly was born on January 2nd, 1921, so she would have only been 15 years old. This was the 30s and clearly a different time. I did the math, and it looks like this marriage, although it would turn out to be a good one, was what the kids call a shotgun wedding. Because 3 months after the couple were wed, Dolly gave birth to a son, Finis Ray Dodd, on February 23rd, 1937. Dolly had just barely turned 16.
Oh, that definitely was a shotgun wedding.
Absolutely it was.
You didn't even have to use your fingers to count for that one.
Nope. But I didn't recognize it right at first until I was actually typing in the date, and I was like, wait a minute. When their son was still a toddler, William was ordained into the ministry of the Pentecostal Holiness Church in 1939. He would be a respected reverend for over 35 years. The couple would go on to have a daughter, whom they named Lois Nadean Dodd. She was born on September 12, 1940, in Oklahoma. Dolly and William also had a second son, Bob, but I'm unsure where he fit into the equation. I couldn't find his birth date, as I believe he might still be living. William was a husband, a father of 3, a reverend, and also an entrepreneur. He opened Dodd's Plumbing in 1953. When he got older, he grew beautiful gardens and was a crossing guard at Greenwood Elementary School for 23 years. The kids at the school lovingly called him Granddad. And just a little side note that his eldest son would also end up becoming a crossing guard at a couple of schools.
It's cute.
It is. Dolly stayed home to take care of the children and was a loving mother. the couple raised their children in the Cherokee County of Oklahoma. No one would have suspected that a couple like this were raising a murderer. Dolly and William did what it took to keep their marriage going. They stayed married for 62 years, until Dolly passed away at the age of 77. William would pass away 4 years after his wife at the age of 84. Both would die knowing that their daughter was a cold-blooded killer.
Where does it go all wrong from this sweet couple?
That's a good question that I was not able to figure out. By all accounts, Dolly and William were good people. They were loving parents and gave their children a good life. It seems like their sons grew up and became wonderful people as well. However, we cannot say the same thing for their daughter, Lois Nadean. Lois was known for having a quick temper and could be a bully. As a child, she earned herself the nickname Mean Nadean. It sounds like she went by the name of Nadine, so that is how I will refer to her, but it is hard to not just call her Mean Nadean this entire time. Nadine's hot head would often cause her to strike out violently towards those whom she felt wronged her, or whoever she decided to pick on.
Was she just totally entitled?
I don't know. She seems to almost have a split personality. Because at the same time, she attended church with her family. Even as a teenager, she was active in Sunday school in the church. And as she reached adulthood, she also began playing the piano for the choir. After graduating, Nadine went to business college, so she did have some smarts about her as well. She had every leg up in the world to have a successful life. I could not find an explanation as to why Nadine turned out so differently. I did read that she sustained a head injury in 1966 when she was 26 years old as the result of a bad car accident, but she was already a meanie by then. She really seems like an anomaly.
So her personality didn't change much after the head injury?
No. She would try to use that as an excuse later on in court, but she was already mean by the time she had this accident.
So was she just one of those mean girls?
I think so.
Just like to get under people's skin.
I think she did, and I don't know if it was I'm the spoiled girl out of this family with all sons, or
the little princess.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think whatever happened with Nadine was definitely nature and not nurture this time, because she came from a good family. She had a good life.
Interesting.
She was just not a nice person.
Just so sad to think that there are just those people born that way.
They are, unfortunately, and often we end up talking about them. But like I know you have said in previous cases that this is always more unnerving when we don't have the explanation as to why someone becomes like this.
So true.
As you will learn, we do definitely have a perceived motive from Nadine for what she does. Despite being mean, Nadine did get married. She married a man named James, or Jim, Hork Smith. Their marriage lasted close to 18 years. Nadine and Jim had multiple children together. I couldn't find an exact number, but from what I gathered in the court documents, they had at least 4, and a mix of sons and daughters.
Okay. And does she have one favorite that becomes her mama's boy?
I don't know if she had a favorite, but she definitely has a mama's boy who we are going to talk about today. People would say that Nadine was a good mother to her children. Even her children said this. She held down a steady job to support the family. She took the kids to church and made sure they were cared for. On the flip side of this, Nadine's relationship with her husband was volatile at times. Jim became a heavy drinker and would beat on his wife. He would also be mean to the kids. During Nadine's trial, Jim admitted to being abusive towards her. The two would fight with one another, and on 2 separate occasions, Jim broke Nadine's leg.
What?
So it got pretty vicious.
That's violent.
It is violent. That takes a lot of strength to break a leg. At one point, Nadine had a restraining order out on Jim. While the restraining order was in effect, in 1965, the couple got together and were drinking. Unsurprisingly, a fight broke out between them. One thing led to another, and Nadine ended up shooting Jim with a .25 caliber gun.
Oh, that's a little more than breaking your leg.
It is. But in her defense, Jim said that Nadine didn't shoot him on purpose, and that it happened during a struggle between them. So they were literally fighting over the gun, and he accidentally got shot.
Oh yes, this relationship sounds very volatile.
It was. It was giving me Betty Lou Beats vibes. Eventually, the pair split and then got a divorce. But it seemed that they stayed in each other's lives. After all, they did have a bunch of kids together. Jim would go on to get married again to a woman named Robin. But I did not find any reports of Nadean doing the same, and she kept her last name as Smith. As I researched this case, it seemed like there was a kind of Jekyll and Hyde thing going on with Nadean. She could be a sweet, church-going, attentive mother on one hand, and on the next hand, she could be a bully who couldn't control her temper. To exacerbate this meanness, it was noted in the court documents that Nadean would become especially cruel while she was under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So she was a mean drunk.
What kind of drugs was she using?
I know marijuana for sure, but I don't know if there were other drugs that she was taking.
That's more than enough.
We are going to jump to the year 1982. At this time, Nadean was 42 years old. She had a son named Thomas Gregory Smith who went by Greg. Greg was 18 years old and was already getting into trouble. He was not only a drug user, but was a drug dealer, a fact that his mother was well aware of. Nadean was not bothered by this fact. She was known to use drugs, so perhaps he was her supplier.
Or how he got into it in the first place.
Yeah, that could have been too. I think a lot of us could know a mom like this. A mom who is oblivious to the fact that their child might be a dirtbag and has a hard time seeing the wrong in anything they do. A mom who will defend their child at any cost.
It is so interesting how that urge to protect can go into overdrive and become a way to excuse behavior as well.
And blind you to the behavior right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. Greg had been dating a 20-year-old girl named Cynthia, or Cynthia Baillie. For whatever reason, the two broke up and Greg moved on to his next relationship. He was now dating a girl named Teresa Baker. I'm unsure if Greg and Cindy ended on bad terms, but after their breakup, Nadean became paranoid that Cindy would rat out her son to the cops for his drug dealing.
So Cindy was aware of his extracurricular activities.
100% aware. And Nadean knew that. Nadean would later say that she had heard rumors that Cindy was looking to hire someone to kill her son. But I honestly don't think that was true. Or if it was, I didn't find any documents to support that idea. I think Nadean just didn't want her son to be held responsible for his criminal actions if police found out he was dealing. Either way, Nadean was livid. She was brewing in a cloud of revenge. She decided that Cindy had to pay for double-crossing her precious son.
Do you think Greg told his mom that?
I don't know. I think Cindy kind of came into their family, saw what was going on, and then when they broke up, I think Nadean was just worried, well, now what if she calls the cops now that you guys are broken up?
Okay, so she's made up this scenario in her head, not Greg has planted these ideas in her head.
That I don't know.
Okay.
But at the time of her arrest, she was saying, oh, I even heard that she was hiring someone to kill my son. So I had to put a stop to this.
And that's how she justifies her actions.
Yes. Where Cindy hadn't done anything. This was just perceived, as far as I could tell, which makes it that much more heartbreaking. On the morning of July 4th, America's Independence Day, 1982, Cindy agreed to get into a car with Nadean, Greg, and Greg's new girlfriend, Teresa. The group picked up Cindy from a hotel in Tahlequah. The fact that Cindy went with them tells me that she was amicable with Greg and had no idea what was in store for her, and that Nadean was blowing the situation way out of proportion. If Cindy was truly arranging a hit on Greg, I don't think she would get into a car with him, his mother, and his new girlfriend.
No, and it doesn't sound like she would do that if she was trying to snitch on him either.
No, you don't get into a car with your ex and his mom and his new girlfriend if you don't have a good relationship with them.
Right.
There was obviously some level of trust there.
It seems like there would be.
Mm-hmm. Or you wouldn't get into the car.
Right.
And if I was hiring to kill somebody, I wouldn't want to be seen with them at all. You would be thinking about that if you were already plotting.
Well, I don't know. That would establish a good alibi.
I wouldn't want to be seen anywhere near them because they could be like saying, later you were seen on this day in the car with him. You still have a connection with him.
No, I would be using that as my alibi saying that, look, we were still really good friends. Why would I arrange to have him killed if we were still on good terms?
Okay, I can see that. I would just not want my name mixed in anywhere in the previous weeks or months leading up to their killing. Not that we would hire anybody to kill anybody else.
So you would be an out of the blue and I'd be right there down and dirty.
Right, because I could be like, no, we haven't even spoken or seen each other for 6 months. Why would I have him killed?
And I'd be like, no, we're the best of friends. We get along perfectly.
In this situation, I honestly think I'd be walking and you'd be in the slammer. Because you're putting yourself next to it. You're inserting yourself in the situation.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
Like, Greg? Greg who? Oh, I forgot I dated him. Yeah, no, I haven't seen him in 6 months.
No way. Because they're going to put a connection.
No.
I'm going to override the connection. I'm going to ram it in there. Of course we were together. We were the best of friends.
Well, then the questioning would be, oh, so you couldn't let him go and he had a new girlfriend. Were you jealous?
No, because I was with her in the car too. Mm-hmm. We were all having a good time.
Yeah. Too good of a time.
No, not that way.
Did things get messy? Yeah, no. Don't do it. Don't do it, you guys. Okay. We got off on a little tangent here.
Regardless, Cindy's in the car with Greg, his mom, and his new girlfriend.
Yes, Teresa. There had to be some level of comfort for her to do that.
It would seem that way.
Yeah.
Unless she's trying to establish her alibi.
I didn't find anything. I honestly don't think she had any plans of any injury or anything to happen to Greg. But that didn't stop Nadine for seeking revenge for something that hadn't even happened. Nadine was sitting in the back seat of the car with Cindy. She wasted no time in confronting Cindy about turning in her son, or as she claims, hiring someone to kill him. So she confronted her right away. Cindy denied the accusations being thrown at her. And this just enraged Mean Nadean. Honestly, in my opinion, I don't think Cindy could have said anything to save herself that day. I believe that Nadine had already made up her mind about Cindy's fate well before they picked her up from the motel.
Was that the reason why they had picked her up from the motel?
Yes, I believe so.
So they had premeditated this. They were going to confront her and kill her.
Yes. I think that Nadine and Greg had already planned this out.
And was Greg's girlfriend in on this too?
I don't think so. She was there, though.
It was a big shock to her how it all played out.
She might have known that they were going to confront her. That I'm not 100% sure of, but I don't think she believed they were going to kill her.
Okay. She's going to be the next one dead then.
That's how I think she felt as this all plays out. Seeking revenge for something that hadn't even happened, Nadine began choking Cindy. Cindy was trapped in a car and had no way of getting away. Nadine put on black gloves and told Cindy that she would never see Cherokee County again. She then proceeded to continue choking her for about 2 to 3 minutes. Teresa, Greg's girlfriend, would later testify that Cindy's eyes began to roll into the back of her head while Nadine choked her. A lot of the information that we have about the crime came from Teresa. Nadine then grabbed a knife and stabbed Cindy in the neck with it. To be extra cruel, she twisted the knife before pulling it back out. This knife was Cindy's and was taken from her purse. Cindy held on while the group drove over to Jim Smith's home in Gans, Oklahoma. He's Nadine's ex-husband and Greg's father. When they arrived, Jim was home with his wife, Robin. It was said that Robin left the house not too long after the group arrived. I looked up the distance between Tahlequah and Gans, and it takes just over an hour to drive between the two places. I am unsure of how soon after they picked up Cindy that she was stabbed. But regardless, it is highly unlikely that she wouldn't have been covered in blood from her neck wound by the time they arrived at Jim's.
Is she still alive at this point?
She is.
Oh.
She's alive for a while after this point. Robin left knowing this was trouble, but it didn't sound like she went to the police for help when she left. As Nadine and Greg forced Cindy into the house, Nadine began taunting her and telling her that she was going to die. I cannot imagine how terrified she would have been. She was outnumbered and injured already at this point.
How do you get this many people to go along with it? Like, how do you show up at your ex-husband's house and he's just like, okay, bring her in?
Yeah, we will talk about that a little bit. He had no idea when they first showed up what was happening. They just showed up at his house. It wasn't planned that they were going to go there, so he wasn't expecting them.
But he still let them in his house with a person that has a gaping neck wound.
Right. But if I showed up at your door with someone with a gaping neck wound, are you automatically going to think I did that or bring them in to help them?
Well, if you're taunting them at the same time, then
True.
Yeah, I'm thinking you did it.
Yeah. I'm not sure what he was witnessing right away. He does testify later against Nadine. And I think that's why Robin left. She's like, I'm getting out of here. I want no part of this.
So she had the good sense to at least get out of the house, just not to call the cops.
Right. Cindy was forced to sit in a recliner chair. Nadine pulled out a pistol and began scaring Cindy with it. She raised the pistol and purposefully shot into the chair right next to her head just to terrorize her.
What?
So cruel.
How does she have this huge mean streak?
She's Mean Nadean.
She's seems so bizarre.
I know.
Like, this is beyond Mean Girl stuff.
This is. I don't know how this escalated to this. I'm unsure how long they tortured this poor girl, but before long, Nadine pointed her pistol right at Cindy and shot multiple times. Cindy fell from the chair and onto the floor. She was still alive. Nadine gave her son the gun so he could reload it. She was out of ammo. What Nadine did next is truly heartless and disgusting. While Cindy laid on the floor, fighting for her life, Nadine began jumping up and down on her neck.
What? So she's been choked, stabbed, and shot, and now she's jumping up and down on her.
Yes, on her neck. And to make it worse, Nadine loudly laughed at her own despicable actions while she jumped. So she's jumping up and down on her, laughing out loud.
She is off her rocker.
I don't know how one human can do this to another. It is mind-blowing. Cindy hadn't even done anything wrong to Greg. Nadine just heard a rumor and ran with it.
Were there others that said she had like this split personality or multiple personalities?
Just that she could be this sweet church-going lady, yes, and then be super mean and be a bully.
This is beyond being a bully, though.
Oh yeah, we've escalated now.
This is sadistic.
Yeah, this is a premeditated murder.
And nothing comes out afterwards about any mental health issues?
No, none.
Wow.
Just evil.
Mm-hmm. It seems like she's just snapped, especially with the laughing.
I know. It was so haunting to picture that in my mind, her doing that.
And while she's doing all this jumping, there's people just sitting there watching her do it.
Yes.
Are they egging her on?
No, we will talk about this, but they had all already been threatened.
Oh, okay.
By Nadine.
So maybe they had tried to stop her then, at least.
I think Nadine took control of the situation right from the start. And we will talk about this, but at this point, she had ordered Jim to the bathroom by gunpoint. So he wasn't even there watching this happen. So it's not that all these people are standing around egging her on. It was Nadine and Greg doing this together. Teresa was scared for her life. Robin had left and Jim was sequestered to the bathroom.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Robin hadn't just left. She had kind of like fled.
I think so. It was pretty vague about it, but it said that she didn't stay there for very long. I think when they were taunting her and the things that Nadine was saying and that Greg was saying, she said, I'm getting out of here. And I honestly think Teresa was just terrified. So before she starts jumping, she hands the pistol to Greg to reload. Greg, after loading the gun, handed it back to his mother and said, quote, finish it off. And sadly, that is exactly what Nadine did.
So he's completely on board with all this.
100%.
Did he know ahead of time that his mom was going to do all this?
I think so. I totally believe that he did.
So did he believe that Cindy was spreading rumors about him too and had possibly hired a hit on him?
Yep.
So it isn't just a delusion that Nadine's made up in her head.
It's hard to say. Greg could have had this agenda of manipulating his mom into having this anger and resentment and this attitude of revenge towards Cindy for his own purposes.
Okay.
It's never very clear.
But he knows that his mom's such a volatile person that she'll be on board.
Oh yeah, they were in this together. And sadly, once Greg handed his mom back the gun and said, finish it off, that is exactly what she did. She proceeded to shoot Cindy 4 more times.
4 more times.
4 more. Cindy was shot 5 times in her chest, once in her back, and twice in her head. A later autopsy would state that 5 of these gunshots were considered fatal, and the stab wound to her neck had the potential to be fatal. Some reports state that there were 9 bullet wounds in total, so there may have been a superficial one that wasn't included in the court documents.
That is overkill.
That is overkill, and so vicious and mean.
It almost sounds like she was having fun with it.
I think she was, because she was totally taunting her and wanting to terrorize her.
And laughing.
Yes. Trying to get her to confess, but all the while knowing that Cindy was going to die that day. After ending young Cindy's life, the group went to work to clean up the crime scene and discard Cindy's body. Nadine spearheaded this, along with getting rid of evidence and coming up with combined alibis. Cindy's body was later discovered. She was wearing a dress and sandals. It was clear by the holes and blood in the dress that Cindy had been shot multiple times. The dress that she was wearing was later admitted as evidence during court proceedings. And I don't know why, but the thought of this saddened me. Cindy had no idea when she put on a cute dress that morning that it would be the last time she chose an outfit.
Yeah, that is a sad realization.
Mm-hmm. What wasn't clear in the reports was how or when Cindy's body was found. I don't know if they dumped her somewhere and a stranger found her, or if someone from the murder scene called police. Nadean and Greg were the only ones wanting what happened to actually happen. It was not included anywhere in any of the documents that I found. Regardless, it did not take police long to connect Cindy's murder to the dirtbag Smith family. Nadean denied having anything to do with what happened to Cindy. During proceedings, officers offered Teresa, Greg's girlfriend, immunity if she would testify against Nadean and let them know exactly what happened.
It almost seems like with you not being able to find that in the court documents, that somebody's being protected for coming forward.
That is what I think.
Yeah, I think that's what happened.
Because otherwise there would have been news reports about a body being found.
That's right.
Yeah.
The witness that found it is going to tell their story all over the place.
Yes. So I think it was likely Jim, Robin, or Teresa.
Right.
So Teresa was given this offer and she took it. It was a no-brainer for her. Feel what you may about this. I'm not often keen on people who are involved in a murder getting complete immunity, but I honestly think that Teresa didn't have anything to do with what was going on, and likely would have ended up the same way as Cindy had she tried to intervene. My guess is she was terrified, especially at how callous they were acting, laughing while inflicting fatal injuries to a girl who had once been just like her, Greg's girlfriend.
Yeah, that would have been ominous.
Yeah, she knew she was disposable.
And especially the reason why they're killing her, because they think that person snitched on them.
Exactly. So if she's going to say anything, she will be considered just as bad as Cindy in Nadine's eyes.
Right. It's not too hard to draw the connection between those dots.
Nadean and Greg were both arrested and charged in the District Court of Sequoia for the murder of Cynthia Baillie. It was decided that the two dirtbags should be tried separately, with Nadean going first. Her trial began on December 6, 1982. Mother and son were represented by the same lawyer. Nadean hired Monty Strout, and then Strout was appointed to represent Greg.
Isn't that a conflict of interest?
Well, Strout informed his clients that as long as their story stayed consistent, he could represent them both because it wouldn't create a conflict of interest. And at first, their story did stay the same. But honestly, it goes all over the place as court proceedings continue. But Nadean would use this later in her appeals, that it was a conflict of interest.
One that she arranged.
Right. Because she knew that Strout had been appointed to her son and didn't have to hire him.
Right.
In the beginning, Nadean and Greg insisted that Greg was in a different part of the house entirely when Cindy was murdered, and that he was listening to the stereo when Cindy was shot and had no idea what was happening.
She tries to get him off?
Oh, she tries to do everything. Nadean had literally killed for her son, so lying about what happened was a piece of cake for her.
Oh, I guess so.
Her main objective always was to protect her son no matter what, and he was happy to let her. Nadean told her lawyer that, quote, above all else, you've got to save Greg. So she was willing to fall on the sword for him if she had to.
Which makes sense because she was willing to kill for him.
Yes. Nadine's defense wasn't going to be that she didn't kill Cindy, but that she was so high on drugs at the time of the murder that she didn't know what she was doing. I do believe that she was high and had consumed alcohol, but I don't believe for one moment that she was not aware of her actions. I full-heartedly think this evil murder was premeditated. However, this story that they settled on didn't last long, and before her trial was to begin, Nadean changed her story to blame the killing on Teresa, the current girlfriend who was going to testify against her.
That's one way to get revenge.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it changed once she found out that Teresa got this deal. Nadean admitted to choking and stabbing Cindy and to shooting the recliner next to Cindy's head, but she insisted that it was Teresa who actually shot and killed Cindy. The only thing that didn't change in Nadine's new story was that sweet little Greggy Poo had nothing to do with any of it. She wouldn't even allow Greg to be called to testify on her behalf just in case he incriminated himself.
And he's all for this.
Oh yeah, heck yeah.
Selfish.
Thanks, Mommy. This is a woman's life we're dealing with. This is not getting him out of skipping school or something like that. Regarding Teresa, I do want to point out that during later appeals, her last name is DeMoss, so that is how she is referred to. I was confused at first, but then finally figured it out. Teresa Baker and Teresa DeMoss are the same person. Court documents commonly refer to people involved in a case by last names, so it took me a minute to figure that out. But if you read something about DeMoss, that's Teresa.
Had she gotten married?
I think so, because that was by time of the appeals and whatnot.
Right.
Nadine's defense team used the idea that Teresa was jealous of Cindy, and that is why she wanted to kill her. Nadean stuck to this story during her trial, but was now denying that she was under the influence. In this version of events, it was Teresa who was flying high and running the show. Nadean called Teresa a liar and tried to paint her as the monster, but thankfully there was witness testimony to corroborate Teresa's claims. Both Jim, Nadine's ex-husband, and his wife Robin testified. They both said that Nadean was the one in control of the situation. She was definitely the ringleader. Robin said that when they arrived at her home with Cindy, Nadean said to the injured girl, quote, "You can tell my husband, his wife, and me whatever you want, but it's too late. You are going to die." Nadean then told Robin that Cindy was going to, quote, "die slow," and that she was, quote, "going to suffer."
It's interesting that Nadean would think she could just change the story when there were witnesses.
Yeah, I think she just thought everyone was going to go with whatever her plan was because she was used to being in control. Thought it was interesting, too, that she referred to Jim still as her husband.
Yeah.
My husband, his wife, and me.
It's all about her.
It is all about her. But it does tell me that they still had somewhat of a relationship, even that she went to his house.
Or that she still views him as a possession.
Could be.
And just hers to use whatever way she wants to.
That's true. Robin testified of a few other things as well. She said when they got there, Nadean told Teresa to go out to the car to get clean clothes for Cindy. She said Teresa gave no orders to anyone while she was there, nor did she say anything argumentative towards Cindy. If she was jealous and running the show, she surely wasn't acting like it. She also said that she never saw Teresa with a gun. Teresa's tape testimony was played in parts. She said that she had lived with the Smith family for a brief time, but was not allowed to eat dinner with the family while she lived there.
What?
Yeah, so I feel like Nadean was very much, this is my family. These are my children. Way over the board, protective mother hen. You're not good enough to sit and eat with us.
Or controlling and possessive.
Yes. If she was alive today, she'd be making one of those TikToks about her son not eating your daughter's lasagna. But I just felt like that spoke to her character. And this I already spoke about a little bit, but during the trial, that is when it came out that Nadean ordered Jim, her ex, to go back into the bathroom when he came to see what was happening. She did this while pointing the gun at him. Jim said that she didn't point the gun at him, but that he did retreat to the bathroom. I think everyone except for Nadean and Greg were terrified. Nadean verbally threatened everyone else involved that day, even Greg. She had put everyone's life in danger. This fact of endangering others would be used against her during court proceedings. Nadean rebuked everyone's testimony against her and claimed that Teresa was in cahoots with her ex-husband to kill Cindy.
She's changing her story again.
Oh my goodness. Reading through the documents, it seems like she was throwing as much shade as she could, hoping that something would stick, a tactic that she would continue to do through multiple appeals later. When one thing wouldn't work, she'd come up with another.
Is she a compulsive liar as well?
I didn't read that.
Okay. Or is she totally believing these stories that she's coming up with?
I think sometimes when people lie enough, they almost start to believe their own lies.
Well, and that usually happens with compulsive liars.
Mm-hmm. Sealing Nadine's fate was the fact that prosecutors had more to go on than just witness testimony. They had actual evidence to prove that Nadean was the person mainly responsible for Cindy's death.
Fingerprints on the knife, her shoe marks on her clothing, and her fingerprints on the gun.
Well, the gun had been wiped clean, but there was blood spatter evidence. A chemist from the OSBI, Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, Kenneth Eade, testified as an expert witness in the field of blood and biological tissue analysis, hair analysis, and interpretation of blood spatter evidence. Eade had carefully examined the blouse that Nadean had been wearing at the time of the murder. He said that he had, quote, geometrically interpreted the blood spatter on the front of the blouse and was able to conclude that the person who was wearing the shirt had to have been standing parallel to Cindy when she was shot, and that whoever wore that shirt at the time had to be the person responsible for the fatal shooting. Nadean would later appeal that Eade was not qualified to make this assumption regarding blood spatter, but his testimony stood.
Why didn't you think he was qualified?
It wasn't his main field of expertise.
Oh, okay. But he was the one that examined it.
Yes. And she had been notified weeks ahead of time, her and her counsel, that he was going to be the one. They could look into him. They agreed to it. And it wasn't until later that she's like, well, no, that wasn't fair. Nadine's lawyer did consider having a psychological exam performed on Nadean, but decided it wasn't needed. He said that Nadean was, quote, perfectly lucid and had a good memory. He said that Nadean was definitely under the influence of drugs and alcohol, but didn't want that mentioned since her parents would be at the trial and she didn't want them to know.
She was okay with them knowing she was a murderer?
Yeah. She's 42 years old, and I wrote, honey, you are on trial for murder. I think that trumps any drugs or alcohol that you had.
Yeah.
But that just shows that other side of her, that church-going daughter.
Right. But do you think her parents would have been more relieved or less relieved to hear that she was high on drugs when she did this? Wouldn't you just be a little bit more relieved?
You would hope so. It would give some explanation as to not just my daughter's a monster.
Right.
In the closing arguments from the prosecution, they asked the jury this rhetorical question, quote, have you seen any remorse here today from the defendant? This comment would be used in one of Nadine's appeal objections. She would say it was an improper remark. I say, how about killing a 20-year-old girl? Isn't that more improper, Mean Nadean? Plus, it was true. She didn't show an ounce of remorse. She was denying her actions. But she got her panties in a knot over that one.
Well, she's just looking for anything to get her panties in a knot over.
She is. At the conclusion of the first stage proceedings, the jury decided that Nadean was guilty of first-degree murder. At the end of the second stage proceedings, the jury found that 2 aggravating factors existed. 1, the murder was especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel. And 2, Smith knowingly created a great risk of death to more than one person.
Because she had threatened them all.
Yes. Because of these aggravating factors, Nadean was handed down the death sentence on December 29th, 1982 by the State District Court. Nadean would later try to appeal these aggravating factors, but was thankfully denied each time. About this part of her appeal, one document stated, quote, concerning whether the evidence supports the jury's findings of the 2 statutory aggravating circumstances, we have previously stated that the, quote, great risk of death to more than one person was supported by the evidence. We find that the aggravating circumstances of heinous, atrocious, or cruel is likewise supported. The victim was first choked, then stabbed in the throat, then taken to a house where she continued to beg for her life, while the appellant tortured her with a revolver by shooting it into the chair in which the victim sat, and by alternately pointing it at her head and stomach until the first bullet wounds were inflicted. When the victim fell to the floor, the appellant jumped on her neck until the reloaded pistol was handed back to the appellant, who discharged all 6 rounds into the helpless victim.
Yeah, that seems heinous.
Totally. And even the fact that she kept moving the gun around, like, oh, where am I going to shoot you? Where am I going to shoot you? Just to torture her. It was said that Nadean was the embodiment of maniacal evil. She toyed with Cindy before killing her to scare her to the fullest. Consequently, Nadean was sent to await her fate on death row. Before I fill you in on that, let's discuss Greg's trial. He was up next. And I hope he was shaking in his booties knowing that his mother had just received the death sentence.
Do you think he really was, though? Because his mom just kind of took all the blame.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea if he was, but I hope that he was. Because I think he just thought, oh, we'll get off. Mom always has this plan. We're going to pin it on Teresa. And then, oh, she's getting the death sentence. Maybe I should worry.
Through all of her different versions of the events, he's never been around.
That's true. But the truth does come out.
Okay.
More information about Greg's involvement came out during his trial. His mommy couldn't protect him this time. Evidence indicated that Greg was in possession of the gun when the group drove from the motel with Cindy to his father's house. Greg threatened Cindy and told her not to lie to his mother. He pulled out the gun while in the car with Cindy, pointed it at her, and said that he would shoot her in a second and not think anything about it. It also came to light that Greg was the one to pull the knife out of Cindy's purse and handed it to Nadean. He told Nadean that Cindy was going to use the knife to hurt her. He knew Cindy carried a knife because they had dated.
He was egging on his mom.
He totally was. This totally proves that. I think he knew just how volatile his mother was and just how far she would go to protect him.
He's manipulating her.
Yep.
That is not a good mama's boy.
No.
Mama's boys are supposed to protect their mamas.
But mama boys let their moms protect them too. Do their dirty work. Greg was the one to carry the gun into the house and told his father that Cindy had to be killed. Again, this proves premeditation on Greg and Nadine's parts. Once inside the house, Greg asked his dad and stepmom for garbage bags, but then tried to reassure Robin that Jim wouldn't be involved in the murder in any way. So kind of like, hey, sorry to barge in. We want to kill this girl here, but don't worry, you won't get into trouble. And I bet it was just so shocking to Jim and Robin. What the heck is going on? You know, those situations where you're not having time to process on how do I need to react here?
Yeah, because they're just so bizarre that you can't process them.
Yes. While the torture was taking place, 2 neighbors came to the door and asked for Jim. Greg lied and told these men that his father wasn't home and got them to leave. Greg told Teresa, his then-girlfriend, that his mom was going to kill Cindy. During the entire ordeal, Cindy repeatedly pleaded for her life. Greg told her that she deserved to die. He coldly dismissed her pleas and said to her, quote, "Don't beg me, B." Greg reloaded the gun and gave it back to his mother after she had already fired shots at Cindy. This is when he coldly told her to, quote, "finish it off." After Cindy was dead, Greg helped to clean up the blood and discussed whether Cindy's body would fit into the trunk of his car. He also used a towel to clean the blood from the murder weapon. And finally, while in custody, a note was found in Greg's possession from his mother. This note instructed Greg to stick with the story that Teresa was the one who shot Cindy and cleaned up the murder. It said to say that Teresa had been drinking and taking pills prior to the murder. At the top of the note, it read, quote, "Read this over and over until you learn what to say. Don't let anyone see you with it. Flush down stool when finished. Throw away."
She's giving him step-by-step instructions.
Yes. It was clear to a jury that Greg had a hand in Cindy's murder. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and was given a sentence of life imprisonment. Sadly, this sentence would not prevent Greg from going on to wreak more havoc. But first, let's circle back to Nadine. As I mentioned, Nadine filed appeal after appeal and tried her best to prove her innocence and how wronged she was. Listeners, insert eye roll here. Thankfully, each appeal was denied. Nadine had even gone as far as to try and blame things on Greg after he was convicted of the same crime. She didn't want to die. Despite her efforts, Nadine was given a date for her death. She was scheduled to die on Tuesday, December 4th, 2001 at 7:00 p.m. Unsurprisingly, anti-death penalty groups tried their hardest to stop this from happening. In fact, 8 women were arrested while protesting Nadine's execution on her execution date before it happened. The women were held on a misdemeanor trespassing complaints after crossing a police line at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in Oklahoma City. The prison is located in Pottawatomie County. And didn't you cover a case from there?
Yeah, that was Liz Golier.
Oh, that's the one that we talked about in our Broken Hearts collaboration.
Yes, it is.
I knew I had heard that county name before. It's definitely a memorable one. So this is where Nadine was. She had been housed at this facility, but was transferred to Oklahoma State Penitentiary for the execution. There was a large group of protesters, but it was just these 8 that were arrested. Letters were written to try and save her life, and a group of people publicly fasted in protest of her death. But there were also people at the protest advocating for victims. One person who attended wore a shirt that read, quote, "The crime scene will return to normal. What about the victims?" A final denial for clemency by a vote of 3-2 was given in early November, just a month before the execution. This is when Nadine stated that she suffered a head injury, was protecting her son, and was under the influence when she did it. In rebuttal of her claims, Assistant Attorney General Jennifer Miller told the board that Nadine was able to hold down a job and had denied using drugs or alcohol during her trial.
That came back to bite her in the butt, didn't it?
It did, and I'm glad it did.
That's what you get when you tell so many lies. You can't remember which ones you've told.
Yep, you get caught in them. And she was basically saying, sorry, Nadine was a functioning member of society.
Mm-hmm.
She can't say that this head injury caused her to do it. Amnesty International asked the governor, Frank Keating, to call off the execution, but his spokesman stated that the executions would go forward. And I say executions because Nadine wasn't the only woman being executed in Oklahoma that year. I think there was actually a woman the same week. She was the 3rd and final one. She was the 17th person to be executed that year in the state. And that year, Oklahoma led the nation in the most executions.
Getting things done.
Mm-hmm. Despite all efforts, Nadine's execution of lethal injection went on as scheduled. Her last meal consisted of barbecue ribs, onion rings, strawberry banana cake, and cherry limeade.
We never had strawberry banana cake before.
I bet it would be good. I was like, that was actually a pretty good last meal. I could handle that as a last meal. At the age of 61, Mean Nadean was pronounced dead at 9:13 p.m. on December 4th, 2001. Before the lethal mix of chemicals were administered, Nadean thanked her attorneys and then spoke to Cindy's loved ones. She said, quote, "To the families, I want to say I'm sorry for the pain and loss I've caused you. I ask that you forgive me. You must forgive to be forgiven."
What?
Oh, I'm sorry, but this angered me. You don't get to tell people that they have to forgive you to be forgiven, you heartless manipulator. Just say sorry and close your ugly mouth. To me, it totally negated her apology, and I don't believe that she was remorseful at all.
No, it doesn't sound like that.
Oh, it bothered me a lot when I read that. Please forgive me. If you want to be forgiven, you have to. Be quiet. Nadean also expressed her love for her children and then recited the scripture, quote, "To live is Christ, to die is gain," meaning she will gain even more after death. She followed this by saying, "Thank you, Jesus." And I don't know for sure, but their meeting in the afterlife might have been a little more awkward than she suspected. Just saying.
Maybe it didn't go as she had planned.
Maybe not. She had some explaining to do. Present at the execution was Nadine's 4 attorneys, an investigator, and a spiritual advisor. It didn't sound like anyone from her family or personal life attended. If they did, it wasn't noted. Cindy's loved ones, on the other hand, were present at the execution. At the time of the murder, Cindy had a 4-year-old daughter named Brandy.
Aww.
Brandy was now 24 years old. She was there with her husband, her sister, and a family friend, as well as others. About the execution, Brandy said, quote, "You do something of this magnitude, torturing somebody, you're going to have to pay the price for it. She chose her path in life." She also said, quote, "I'm glad it's over. It's been a long time."
20 years is a long time to wait.
It is.
Have that drawn out, especially through all of those appeals.
Yep. And Brandy was very active in all of those appeals and the whole process. Brandy also commented about Nadine's speech on forgiveness. It rubbed her the wrong way too. She said, quote, "If she really meant it, you have to forgive even though it's very hard and it doesn't help me at all. It does a little bit, but it doesn't bring my mom back. I wish she thought of this before she did what she did. We wouldn't be in this position." And I thought how true. Nadean was asking for forgiveness, a mercy she did not extend towards Cindy. Funny how she felt Cindy should die because of an unproven rumor, but that her own life should be spared after brutally torturing and murdering someone, and she should be forgiven.
That does seem backwards.
It does. It's funny how the tables turn when they're put in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Brandy had to grow up without her mother and was very vocal in making sure her mother's killer was brought to her final justice. In a letter to the Pardon and Parole Board, Brandy wrote, quote, "Lois Nadean Smith has had the privilege of breathing for 20 years too long. It's about time that Lois Nadean Smith is brought to justice for the crimes she had done to me and my family." Unfortunately, justice isn't completely over for Cindy's family. Brandy stated, quote, "It's not completely over because I still have to go and do that until he dies," meaning advocate against Greg's parole hearings. She continued to say, quote, "I'm glad this part of it is over because I don't ever have to hear that she's got clemency or is going to stay the rest of her remaining life in prison. She got what the courts handed down to her." Cynthia Lucille Baillie was born on November 17th, 1961, and was taken from the earth on July 4th, 1982, at the young age of 20. She is laid to rest at the Tahlequah Cemetery. On Find a Grave, Brandy, Cindy's daughter, has written, quote, "I am Cynthia Baillie's daughter. She was taken too soon in a way no one should have to be. A beautiful smile gone, a loving mother taken too soon, forever loved and missed. I love you, Mama. Love always, Brandy." And I saw photos of Brandy, and she looks just as beautiful as her mother, Cindy. And I just want to say thank you to her for advocating for her mother when she couldn't do it for herself. Brandy's strength is truly admirable.
That is amazing that Brandy has that strength, but it just makes Nadean that much more of a dirtbag because she knew she had a daughter.
Yes, she knew she was robbing someone of their mom.
Mm-hmm.
And being a mom was so important to her.
She just couldn't see past herself, though.
No, nothing mattered more than her little Greg. And speaking of Greg, let's go back to him now. Greg did spend nearly 3 decades in prison for his part in Cindy's death. He would have been incarcerated at the time of his mother's execution. He was eventually paroled in January of 2009, 26 and a half years after Cindy's death. Soon after his release, within months, he was picked up for possession of marijuana. As a result, he was sent right back to prison for an additional 2 years. He was let out again on probation in April of 2011. However, Greg still didn't learn his lesson. He was a dirtbag through and through. In December of 2014, Greg, at the age of 50, was arrested in Bozeman, a city in southwest Montana, for kidnapping and assault. He was charged with felony kidnapping and misdemeanor domestic assault. His bail was set at $250,000 and was ordered to stay 1,500 feet away from his victim without any contact. And I don't think he actually made bail anyway, but don't quote me on that. So let me explain the kidnapping. On Friday, December 5th, 2014, a woman placed a call to 911 at 9:15 p.m. and whispered, "Help me." Soon, Bozeman police arrived at the East Main Street Motel where the call was made. As soon as police pulled up to the scene, a frantic woman ran towards their car and begged for them to put her inside the vehicle. She was terrified. This woman's name was Kathleen. She had been in a relationship with Greg and was trying to flee. She traveled from shelter to shelter in between states trying to escape him. Kathleen had fled Colorado, and while en route to a shelter in Bozeman, Greg caught up with her. He was relentless in finding her. Wherever she fled, he hunted her down. Greg found Kathleen on October 9th, 2014, and forced her into a motel room. He held her captive in this motel room for nearly 2 entire months.
Wow.
Like, had her chained up captive.
He is, wow.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is.
Evil.
Yeah.
Terrible. Disgusting. Awful.
Dirtbag.
Yes. Dirtbag sums it up. Inside the motel room, Greg repeatedly beat Kathleen, treated her like a prisoner, and viciously threatened to kill her. It took Kathleen 2 months to get a chance to escape. Greg had fallen asleep and she decided to take her chances. She managed to get to the phone and call for help. It sounded like she was physically restrained a lot of the time, and that is why it took 2 months.
That is just so sad and would have been absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, that's straight out of a horror movie. Being held captive in a motel room for 2 months is terrible.
Was her family not looking for her?
They thought she was going to all these different shelters.
Oh, so that's how they explained why she wasn't in contact with them.
Right. Or maybe they did know and just couldn't find her.
Right.
But she was trying to hide. She was trying to get away. She was literally en route to another shelter. When police arrived, Greg tried to talk his way out of it. He told police that they were both just drunk and he never held her against her will. When police looked into Greg's background, it did not take them long to learn that he was a low-life dirtbag. In addition to his time spent behind bars for Cindy's murder and drug charges, Greg was wanted for multiple offenses. Just a month prior to the kidnapping, in September 2013, Greg got into a fight with another man named David McDaniel and was accused of stabbing him. David and Greg had gotten into a verbal fight in the 600 block of Sooner Drive in Bozeman. David told Greg to take off, and he did, but only for a few minutes. Greg, being the hothead that he is, drove away but then circled back only 5 minutes later. He got out, and he and David continued to argue. Greg then stabbed David in the chest and took off. David later said that he felt some pain but didn't realize he had been stabbed until he looked down and saw his shirt becoming soaked in blood. Police were alerted to the situation when David McDaniel showed up to the hospital to be treated with a stab wound to his upper chest. Greg was promptly arrested and charged with assault and battery with a deadly weapon for this offense. There was blood evidence collected on the door of Greg's truck that he was driving when he stabbed David.
Why wasn't he put in jail for this offense?
I think he got out on bond.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised he got bond with that kind of history.
It's crazy. This was now in a different state.
Oh.
Because now he's in Montana.
But still, they would have known his history.
Yeah, he definitely slipped through the cracks because I'm not done telling you some of the things that he did. In Cherokee County, he was wanted for multiple crimes. 2 months before kidnapping Kathleen, he was charged with assault and battery and possession of a controlled dangerous substance. 4 months prior, he was caught driving under the influence, unlawful possession of paraphernalia, and having an open container of alcohol. 5 months prior, he was caught driving impaired. So just a total dirtbag. 3 days before the kidnapping on October 6th, a bench warrant was issued for his arrest for failing to appear in Cherokee County District Court. And this, I think, was the court appearance for the stabbing. But I thought, why was this guy even out on the streets? He was obviously not making any efforts to be a law-abiding citizen after his part in Cindy's death. Plus, he had been tormenting Kathleen during all of these instances. I'll never understand why his life sentence didn't automatically kick back in the very first time that he violated his parole.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
He was back in jail only a couple of months after he was released for murder. They shouldn't have let him out again. As a surprise to no one, Greg entered a plea of not guilty. He was going with the, "we were both so drunk, she was confused" defense. At this time, Greg was being held in Montana, but Oklahoma hadn't officially violated Greg's parole for leaving the state. This greatly upset Kathleen's family, and rightfully so. Kathleen's daughter started a petition to have him sent to prison, and I wanted to read it. Her petition reads, quote, "In August of 2014, my mom Kathleen was put on a bus to another state through the domestic violence shelter in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, to get away from her ex-boyfriend James Gregory Smith, who had assaulted her and threatened to kill her. On October 9th, 2014, he located her whereabouts in Bozeman, Montana, and held her against her will. Over the last couple of months, she had been beaten and terrorized, and her children's lives were threatened. On December 5th, 2014, she was able to call the police and have him arrested. Today, she was notified that they may not be able to get him on kidnapping, meaning her life is still in danger. He has active warrants for assault and battery in Cherokee County and has left state, but yet his parole has not been violated. He was arrested and is still in jail in Montana, and Oklahoma has still not violated his parole. He and his mother kidnapped, tortured, and killed his ex-girlfriend in 1982. Seems as if this pattern is a norm for him. Except my mother got lucky and was able to get away. But for how long? Help put this dangerous man where he belongs. Protect Oklahoma citizens from becoming another victim. I, as well as 2 other of my mother's children and 3 grandchildren, are in danger of him. He won't stop until she is either dead or he is in prison for the rest of his life. Revoke his parole and extradite him back to Oklahoma. Domestic violence is a crime that cannot keep continuing to let happen. This man will continue to harass, stalk, and beat her until she is dead. A VPO is just a piece of paper to this guy. It will not stop him."
Yeah, I don't think it will.
It will not. And it was wild to me that at the beginning, he was not extradited back to Oklahoma.
That seemed crazy.
Yeah, he eventually is, but not at that time.
It does get a little sketchy when things are in different states.
It does. And I just felt so badly for Kathleen's family when I read this. We often neglect to think of the fear that domestic abuse situations can cause for the family members of the victim, let alone the victims themselves.
True.
Kathleen's daughter updated the petition page 3 years ago saying that Greg was still behind bars. Greg is extremely dangerous. On the petition, people who knew him were sharing their stories, and he was beyond violent and aggressive. I couldn't include any of these stories because there was no way for me to verify the claims, but I have a hard time not believing that at least a couple of them were likely true. From the information that I could gather, Greg was never tried for his charges against David or Kathleen, but was instead sent back to Oklahoma to continue serving his life sentence. As of 2 years ago, he was still there, and I didn't find any reports of him being released, so let's hope he stays there. I honestly believe that there is no way Greg could become a functioning member of society if ever released. I'm assuming and hoping by the way he acted after getting out on parole from first-degree murder that he will more likely die in prison. And that is the story of a mean mama and her boy, the cold-hearted duo who savagely tortured and killed a young woman to seek revenge for something that hadn't even happened yet. Dirtbags Lois Nadean and James Gregory Smith.
The apple did not fall far from that tree, did it?
Nope, it really did not. I didn't find any redeeming qualities about Greg at all.
He did sound like an entitled dirtbag.
Oh, yes. But I did come across a weird fact that I thought I would share. While searching for Greg in the Montana and Oklahoma prisoner databases, I came across a man on the Oklahoma Department of Corrections Oklahoma offender page named Gregory J. Smith. And I showed Melissa these pictures before we started. This man looks like a carbon copy of James Gregory Smith. However, this guy was incarcerated in 1993 and for pretty much the same charges, 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of assault and/or battery with a dangerous weapon. He's also serving life in prison in the same state. At first, I thought this had to be Greg, but the birth date makes him around 9 or 10 years younger than Greg, which is so weird. Are they related, or perhaps even dirtbags have doppelgangers? Which is an unnerving thought. Or maybe it's actually him and someone entered the dates all wrong. I don't know. I just thought it was really weird.
And wouldn't that be a scary thought if dirtbags had doppelgangers?
That would be terrible.
As if there aren't enough dirtbags out there.
Yeah, we need less, not more. But as I was searching these databases, there are a lot of dirtbags. And as per usual, Melissa will be back with us next week with another one.
Until then,
See ya.
bye.
Okay, now we're testing.
Let's go. Hopefully this sounds good.
Yep, one and done.
If you guys only knew how much we talked before we hit the record button.
We just saw each other yesterday, but we had a lot to digest.
And unpack.
Yes, that was the word. But every mama's boy has to have a mama.
Every boy has to have a mama, actually.
That's true.
I'm choking on my spit.
That's usually me. And you usually make fun of me for it.
And now I have to yawn.
Time for a drink. Already, we're 4 minutes in.
I don't even know where my drink... Oh, there it is. You'd think that it was this big that I shouldn't lose it, but...
Her water bottle is literally the size of her head. It's bigger. Drink more water, everyone.
Yes, that's what we're talking about. Water.
Water.
Okay, back to the story.
We've had a few gummy bears, so the sugar might be kicking in. You might be a dirtbag if you're a mom like this.
Blue?
I missed a line. That's why it doesn't make sense.
I'm like...
Okay, let me start this part over. Scratch that. I missed like 3 sentences. Okay.
And here I thought I wasn't paying attention. This is ugh. All the things are going wrong today, Christy.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.